Hi guys, tonight I'll take you on a journey. One you can listen to while you relax, unwind, and drift into sleep. Let's step back in time to ancient Japan, where legends were born, and the line between man and myth began to blur. This is the story of Taira no Masakado. 5 Taira no Masakado. The storm bit the lotus at Tokyo, present date late autumn approx. 3 minutes, the rain began quietly, a soft sigh from the sky. Aiko Takahashi stood motionless under her umbrella, her gaze fixed on the moss-covered stone monument nestled behind a cluster of old office buildings in Tokyo's Otomaki district. Despite the endless hum of modern life, cars, vending machines, muted phone conversations, a profound silence enveloped the small mound known as the Masakado Zuka. She had encountered its name countless times in her university courses, an obscure yet infamous burial site, rumored to hold the severed head of Taira no Masakado, a Heian-era rebel. To most, it was a mere historical footnote or a local superstition. Yet, Iko had always felt a deeper pull, a story insisting on being heard, even when buried under centuries of dust. The kind of narrative that whispers from the very stones of the city. A cold gust curled through the alley, making her umbrella waver. Rain slid down her cheeks, indistinguishable from tears. She shivered, unsure if it was from the chill or the compelling narrative that had drawn her here. Behind her, as Hiroki Suda, her classmate and closest friend, emerged from the narrow sidewalk. "You weren't joking," he said, adjusting his glasses, his eyes wide as he tried to reconcile the small shrine's reality with the Google images he'd skimmed that morning. "It's just there, right in the middle of everything. I told you it was real," Aiko murmured, her voice barely audible above the city's distant drone. "It's not just some urban legend. It's a focal point. The spark of inquiry, a question ignites a quest, approx. 4 minutes, the seeds of their investigation had been sown 2 weeks prior, during a seminar on ancient rebellions and folk religion. Professor K2, a gaunt man with heavy, lidded eyes, whose voice rarely rose above a drone, was lecturing on propaganda in the Heian period. He spoke of how the imperial court in Kyoto manipulated narratives to maintain control, branding dissenters as demons and traitors. It was amidst this discussion that Aiko posed her seemingly innocent question. If Masakado's rebellion failed, and he was labeled a traitor, why was his head buried here in Tokyo instead of being utterly destroyed? Why preserve the symbol of a supposed enemy? Professor Kato paused, a faint, almost knowing smile touching his lips. He lifted his gaze from his notes, looking out at the students. "There are stories," he replied, his voice a low hum. "But they aren't written in the official imperial archives. You'll have to search the cracks of history for that answer. Beyond the victor's chronicle." Aiko had often been tempted by unsanctioned mysteries, drawn to the unspoken histories that lay beneath the surface. But Masakado's tale hooked her completely. The stark contradictions, the profound silence surrounding his true motives, and the persistent whispers of curses plaguing anyone who dared disturb the site. It felt less like history and more like a living, breathing enigma. Later that week, she found herself alone. Not in the bustling main library, but deep within its basement archives. Dust motes danced in the dim light as she pored over out-of-print texts, faded scrolls, and cracked academic translations. Here, she discovered accounts of strange occurrences, earthquakes, following construction near the Zuka, government officials mysteriously resigning after proposing its removal, and even tragic accidents befalling those who showed disrespect. A single chilling phrase echoed across oral testimonies and scribbled marginalia, repeated by scribes over centuries: "They only wait." See, it wasn't just a grave, it was a vigil. The true history of Taira no Masakado beyond the curse of approx. 2 minutes, to understand the curse, one must understand the man. And Masakado's true story, unlike the simplified villain portrayal, is a complex tapestry of feudal politics, family feuds, and a yearning for a more just society. Fi. Born of a fractured age, the Heian period context. Taira no Masakado was born around 593 AD, mid-Heian period in Japan. This era, often romanticized for its courtly elegance in Kyoto, was in reality a time of profound decentralization and growing unrest in the provinces. While the emperor ruled symbolically from the capital, Real power in the distant provinces was increasingly wielded by local magnates and emerging warrior clans. The Bushi, or Masakado, hail from the Kanmu Haishi, a branch of the powerful Taira clan, descendants of Emperor Kanmu himself. However, despite their imperial lineage, they had been demoted from princely status and granted the Taira surname, sent out to the provinces to manage new lands. This descent from the lofty heights of Kyoto to the rugged realities of the counter region shaped Masako's worldview profoundly. His father, of Taira no Yoshimochi or Yoshimasaf, was a powerful landowner in Shimsa province, a modern-day Ibaraki and Chiba prefectures, while historical records are sparse on Masakado's mother. Legends hint at a connection to shamanic traditions, or as local earth spirits, perhaps imbuing Masakado with a unique, almost mystical connection to the land itself. From a young age, Masakado was noted for his intelligence, martial prowess, and often solitary nature. He journeyed to Kyoto in his youth, seeking a position within the imperial police force, the Kibiashi, a common aspiration for ambitious provincial warriors seeking advancement. However, despite his lineage and capabilities, he failed to secure a significant court rank or office. This perceived slight, whether due to court politics, disdain for provincial warriors, or simply bad luck, likely fueled his later resentment toward the distant and seemingly indifferent capital. He learned quickly that loyalty was a precious commodity, rarely reciprocated by those in power. Betrayal, conversely, was cheap and plentiful. The spark of rebellion. From feud to new emperor. Masakado's rebellion did not begin as a grand ambition for the throne, but as a series of bitter family disputes over inherited land and resources. Feudal inheritance laws were often ambiguous, leading to frequent clashes among relatives. His uncles and cousins, including Taira no Kuniko and Taira no Yoshikuni, repeatedly encroached upon his territories, claiming their own imperial lineage gave them rights. In his 935 AD, these disputes escalated into open warfare. Masakado and his men were ambushed by his cousin, Taira no Mamoru's sons, but he skillfully repelled the attack, inflicting heavy casualties. He pursued his enemies relentlessly, burning their properties and consolidating his control over parts of the Kanto region. This aggressive defense, however, drew the attention of the imperial court, which, far from intervening impartially, tended to side with whoever had closer connections in Kyoto. Masakado was summoned to the capital to answer for his actions, but he ignored these summons, believing he would not receive a fair hearing. He saw the court as hypocritical, demanding taxes and loyalty while offering no protection against local tyranny, often perpetuated by their own favored officials. The turning point known for 89 as Masakado, now a seasoned warrior and a respected, albeit feared, figure in the Kanto, attacked the provincial capitals of Ikos Hitachikros, seizing government offices and capturing their governors. He did not initially declare himself emperor, but rather proclaimed a new order, aiming to establish a fair and secure governance in the eastern provinces, free from Kyoto's distant and corrupt interference. He sent messengers to neighboring provinces not with demands, but with his promises of protection and just rule. Farmers, artisans, and other samurai, wary of imperial neglect and local abuses, began to swear loyalty not to Kyoto, but directly to Masakado. He was seen not as a usurper, but a true protector of the people. This dramatic assertion of authority, however, was immediately interpreted by the imperial court in Kyoto as an act of treason. They swiftly condemned him, labeling him a rebel, usurper, and even a demon. To them, his actions were an affront to the divine authority of the emperor and the established order. Masakado's declaration of a new order was interpreted as a claim to the title of Shin of Tsinwan, new emperor, an act of ultimate defiance. The fall and the unresting head. History blurs with legend. In the spring of 940 AD, the imperial court put a bounty on Masakado's head. A coalition of provincial warriors, including his own cousin Taira no Sadamori, whose father Masakado had killed, and the formidable as Fujiwara no Hidesato, were commissioned to suppress his rebellion. Masakado, despite his tactical brilliance, was eventually caught in a fierce battle near the border of Shimsa province. Accounts suggest he was betrayed, possibly by a former ally, or simply overwhelmed by superior numbers. He was cut down, and his head was severed. His severed head was transported to Kyoto and publicly displayed on the present gate, Sazakumon, in the capital, a grim warning to any who dared defy imperial authority. But this is where recorded history begins to intertwine inextricably with legend. The stories say that Masakado's head refused to decay. For months, it remained fresh, its eyes wide open, glaring defiantly at passers-by. Some accounts claim it would frequently open its mouth and moan, crying out, "Where is my body?
Come here and fight me again."
This eerie spectacle terrified the citizens of Kyoto. Eventually, out of fear, the head was removed in a quiet mound far from the palace, perhaps in an attempt to pacify its restless spirit. Legends say that even after burial, the head, filled with immense, ornery, vengeful spirit energy, yearned to return to its home in the Kanto. It is said to have as flown through the sky, soaring eastward until it ran out of spiritual power and landed in a small fishing village called Shibasaki. This very spot, where the head supposedly landed, is believed to be the location of the Masakado Zuko in modern-day Otemachi, Tokyo. For centuries afterward, this grave became a site of both reverence and deep superstition. Locals, especially those in what would become Edo and later Tokyo, feared the spirit of Masakado. Disasters, fires, and plagues were often attributed to his awakened wrath if his grave was disturbed or disrespected. He was seen as an Asgardian deity by the common people, who admired his stand against the distant aristocrats, but also as a powerful, easily angered spirit who required constant appeasement. This duality, fierce rebel and protective deity, solidified his legendary status. 2 Funfi first signs and shared visions approx. 4 minutes as Eiko delved deeper into this history. The boundaries of her reality began to blur. The dreams she had always dismissed as mere subconscious wanderings intensified. She began to see not just fleeting images but vivid, visceral scenes. A battlefield shrouded in smoke, the clang of steel, the desperate cries of men. And always the same man, his face still blurred, but his eyes unmistakably alive, defiant, fixing upward as fire licked the horizon. When she woke, the tremor in her hands was not from chill, but from the echoes of a distant past. She confided in Hiroki. At first, she was hesitant, fearing ridicule. But then, to her shock, he described a similar experience. "I saw you," Hiroki said at their campus cafe, his voice hushed. He was standing in a field. Everything was grey, and there was a voice, deep, like it was under the earth. I couldn't understand the words. But you were listening. Iiko spilled her tea. They weren't alone. When they told their mutual friend Aya, usually a steadfast skeptic with a sharp mind for linguistics, she turned pale. She, too, had seen a head, disembodied, floating in a stream, eyes open beneath the water. A chilling synchronicity. Within days, a small group coalesced around Aiko, drawn by a shared sense of unease and profound curiosity. Hiroki, with his logical and grounded approach, became their voice of reason, always seeking a rational explanation. Aya, whose initial fear had morphed into a morbid fascination, brought in valuable linguistic skills and access to rare university archives. Riku, a quiet but brilliant photography student, offered to document their visits, believing his lens could see what the living eye might miss. And finally, Azuna, Aiko's childhood friend and an architecture student, became intrigued by the possibility of undiscovered underground ruins beneath the shrine, her structural insights proving invaluable. Each of them had seen or felt something since the project began. Not always dreams, but sometimes just fleeting shadows, or the strange, undeniable sensation of being watched in reflective surfaces. The feeling always ephemeral, that a presence stood just behind them when they read about the rebellion. They dubbed themselves the Masakado Inquiry, half joke, half ritual, a way to acknowledge the growing strangeness without succumbing to full belief. They never spoke loudly near the shrine. 2. Alpha uncovering the curse's many facets, approx. 5 minutes. Their research quickly led them beyond textbooks, into the living lore of Tokyo. They visited small local museums, ancient Shinto shrines, and even sought out a retired monk who had performed purification rituals near Otemachi for decades. From him, they heard more specific tales of the curse, how the site had nearly been demolished in the 1920s, during the reconstruction efforts after the Great Kanto earthquake of 1903. The Ministry of Finance building, built adjacent to the Zuka, had plans to expand, necessitating the shrine's removal. But a mysterious accident killed 10 workers and disabled equipment, halting the project. This was just one of many such incidents, whispered among those who knew the land's history. Every time someone tries to remove Masakado's resting place, the old monk said, his voice raspy, Tokyo bleeds. He is tied to the prosperity and the calamity of the city itself. But the true turning point came when Aya, amidst cracked genealogy books in a dusty corner of the library, uncovered a forgotten letter. It bore no author or date, its paper brittle with age, but its contents sent a shiver down their spines. It spoke not of a curse of vengeance, but of a spirit trapped not by death, but by injustice. A man whose soul had resisted the afterlife, who still waited for a voice that would listen, a truth that would finally be acknowledged. The letter ended with a chilling, poetic warning. Should his name be spoken not with fear, but with truth, the eyes may blink, and the ground will break open. Seek to fear warning ignored, the descent into the earth he approx. 5 minutes despite the ominous warning, curiosity drew them closer, a powerful, almost magnetic force. Hiroki meticulously compiled a timeline of events, noting every recorded disaster or strange occurrence that coincided with attempts to tamper with the Masakado Zuka. Aiko, through her detailed research, found glaring inconsistencies in the official records surrounding Masakado's execution and the aftermath. Riku, in one of his shrine photos, captured a blurred but unmistakable image of a pale, almost translucent face hovering just behind Aiko. The image was unsettlingly clear, a presence that the naked eye couldn't discern. Still, they pressed on, compelled by an unseen force. Yuna, using old blueprints from city planning offices, discovered hints of an ancient tunnel system beneath Otomaki, sealed after World War II. Her architectural instincts suggested that one particular passage, an anomaly in the city's modern infrastructure, could lead to an older, deeper burial site, predating the visible stone mound above. Or it's just an old sewer system. Hiroki had scoffed, ever the pragmatist, but even his voice lacked conviction. They all agreed they had to check. The expedition was planned for the next full moon, a date chosen less for ritual and more for the deep, moonless night it promised, offering maximal discretion. Tokyo's underground is a labyrinth. Subway tunnels hum with electricity and life, but farther down lie layers forgotten by most, vestiges of a deeper past. The group descended through a maintenance shaft Yuna had gained access to through an old university contact. They moved stealthily, past rusted ladders, dripping pipes, and concrete corridors slick with condensation, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. As they neared what Yuna believed was the burial level, the air changed dramatically. It grew dry, still. The scent of ancient stone and ash, almost metallic, filled their noses. "I don't think we're alone," Aya whispered, her voice barely a breath, her usual skepticism replaced by genuine apprehension. Their flashlights flickered once, then again, and then held steady, casting long dancing shadows. What they found was not a mere chamber, but a wall, a smooth, imposing black surface, not of natural rock but something ancient and man-made, etched with thousands upon thousands of tiny characters. Some were worn almost smooth by time, while others looked eerily fresh, as if carved yesterday. At the very center of this chilling wall was a hollow, perfectly shaped and sized for a human head. The space pulsed with a profound silence, a heavy, waiting stillness that pressed into their ears, their lungs, their very thoughts. Aya took a slow step back, and the soft crunch of her boot on ancient gravel echoed like a scream in the oppressive quiet. "I think this is where the head was," Aiko whispered, a sudden, chilling certainty blossoming in her mind. "Not the shrine above. This is the real place. The true tomb. It's not marked on any map, any record," Yuna murmured, running her hand along the edge of the wall, tracing the faint kanji. "These characters are prayers. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Appeals. Begs for peace. Then why does it feel like rage?" Hiroki asked, his voice low, a tremor of unease finally entering his tone. Aiko didn't answer. She stepped closer to the niche. Her hand trembled, but she reached out anyway, drawn by something primal she couldn't name. As her fingertips brushed the hollow, the powerful flashlight in Riku's hand flickered violently, and then for a split second, everything went black. When the light came back, Aiko was on her knees, disoriented, the others surrounding her in a panic. What happened? She asked, her voice feeling far away, disembodied. You said something. Hiroki recounted, his eyes wide. An old Japanese. A single word, I didn't understand it. I didn't say anything. Aiko insisted, her mind a blank. Riku, shaking, showed her the recording from his camera. There was static, a high, distorted screech, and then a voice that was distinctly not Aiko's, low and sharp and full of something wild, ancient. One word cut through the distortion, clear and resonant. Unmai I, destiny. Kuvanfi, the curse awakens, blurred lines I approx. 5 minutes. The immediate aftermath was subtle, insidious. The next Oaya stopped answering her phone, a quiet, unnerving silence. Riku woke up with inexplicable scratch marks down his back, though he lived alone and his door had been locked from the inside. Yuna, meanwhile, began drawing the hollow niche over and over again, unconsciously, on napkins and notebook margins, even on the fogged glass of train windows. I don't know why I keep seeing it, she confessed to Aiko, her eyes distant. But it's like it's following me. Or it wants me to come back. Aiko had a different, far more personal problem. Every single night since the underground discovery, she dreamed the same dream, a vast, smoke-shrouded battlefield, and the same man, his face slowly gaining clarity, his eyes unmistakably alive, standing in the midst of it all. Each night, the dream went a little further, revealing more details, more intensity. She began to recognize words spoken in the dream. Ancient Japanese, names, places, the distinct clang of specific weapons, the gut-wrenching sting of betrayal. It was more than memory, bleeding into her own. She was no longer just researching Masakado. She was remembering. I think I'm dreaming his memories, she said to Hiroki one evening, her voice barely a whisper. He didn't laugh. He just nodded, very slowly, his usual logical composure replaced by a profound unease. What if this isn't research anymore? What if we're inside the story now? What if we've become part of the curse? A secret revealed, the professor's confessions approx. 3:08, Professor Kato called Aiko into his office a few days later. He looked more tired than usual, almost haggard. Something behind his heavy, lidded eyes had frayed, a weariness that went beyond academic exhaustion. I heard you've been visiting the Masakado site, he said, his voice low, devoid of his usual detached academic tone. With your friends. I also heard you found something more than just a public shrine. Aiko nodded cautiously, her heart pounding. Kaito sighed, leaning back in his chair. I'll tell you something I never put in the syllabus, he began, his gaze drifting to the bustling Tokyo cityscape outside his window. When I was your age, I did the same. I followed the legend. I even found that chamber beneath the city. Just like you did. Aiko's breath caught in her throat. So it's real? The hollow, the wall. Oh, it's real, he said, a grim note in his voice. But you shouldn't have gone there. It's not just a grave. It's a lock. It holds him back. Or rather, it kept him dormant. Then what is he? She asked, a profound fear mingling with an insatiable curiosity. Kaito looked directly at her, his eyes unblinking. A spirit so strong that death couldn't contain him. A warrior who was never allowed to rest, whose narrative was twisted. His anger, his injustice, soaked into the very stones, into the bones of this city. You don't remove a curse like that. You respect it, you feed it rituals. You leave it alone. The city has done so for centuries. Then why do I feel like he wants me to do something? Aiko pressed, the sensation of Masako's memories growing stronger within her. Because he does, Kato said, his voice almost a murmur. You've awakened him. He's awake. We flew fire at the shrine the Suprox. 2 minutes. That very night. Lightning struck the Masakado Zuka. It made the news. A freak accident. During mild weather, a sudden isolated bolt from a clear sky. No one was injured miraculously, but the outer wooden torii gate collapsed into splinters, and a prominent section of the stone mound itself cracked, deep fissures appearing in the ancient masonry. The media offered theories: an electrical fault, a hidden gas pocket, simply terrible luck. Aiko knew better. They returned to the site the next morning. Smoke still curled faintly from the broken stones, the air thick with the scent of ozone and damp earth. And for the first time, standing in the crater of what used to be the shrine. They saw something new, something ominous. A thin, dark hole had opened in the earth, directly below the monument. The underground wall. The hollow, it was connected. The lightning hadn't just struck the shrine, it had opened it. I think we broke the sealed, her face pale, the fear now fully palpable. No, Aiko said, her voice strangely calm, a chilling conviction settling upon her. We just peeled it back. He was never sealed. He was waiting to be remembered. He even fee visions and fractures, the vessel approx. 4 minutes, the dreams intensified, becoming less like dreams and more like direct communion. Aiko now saw Masakado's face, clearly his real face. Not the idealized artistic renderings in textbooks or scrolls. His skin weathered by war, etched with the sun and hardship of the Kanto plains. His eyes, hard and deep, like stone carved by storms, yet filled with a profound sorrow and unwavering defiance. In her dreams, he spoke to her, his voice resonant, echoing from the very earth itself. They betrayed me, he said, his words painting vivid pictures in her mind. My kin, my court, my country. They twisted my truth for their own gain. I never wanted to rule, only to protect my people from their suffering, to bring order where there was chaos. Now they build glass towers on my bones, forgetting the ground they stand upon, forgetting the history they buried. Each time she woke, the same powerful sensation echoed in her chest. It wasn't raw vengeance he craved, though his anger was immense, but sheer acknowledgement. He had been painted as a rebel, cursed for 1,000 years, his legacy distorted. He wanted truth. Just as he wanted his story, his version of events, to finally be heard. But the way he reached for it, the way the earth responded to his awakening, it was not gentle. The subtle disturbances began to escalate. At school, Hiroki noticed that reflections in mirrors, just at the edge of vision, no longer quite matched the movements. A slight delay, a subtle distortion, a fleeting, almost imperceptible other presence. Riku's camera, which had previously captured only faint blurs, began to capture double exposures of people who weren't there, spectral figures woven into the fabric of reality. And Yuna, more acutely sensitive, began hearing distinct footsteps behind her, even when she was utterly alone in silent corridors. A chilling presence that breathed down her neck. The curse wasn't dormant anymore. It was spreading, touching them all, pulling them deeper into Masakado's story. 2. The whisper of ancients, a prophecy revealed. Approx. 3 minutes. A breakthrough came from an unexpected place, far from the urban sprawl of Tokyo. Following a fragmented clue from an ancient text, Iko visited a small, dilapidated countryside temple in Chiba, not far from where Masakado's final, fateful battle was believed to have taken place. The head priestess, an elderly woman named as Michiko, with eyes as ancient as the scrolls she tended, listened quietly as Aiko recounted her dreams, her discoveries, and the strange manifestations affecting her friends. When Aiko finished, Michiko nodded slowly, her gaze thoughtful. She then led Aiko into a back room, shrouded in shadows and the scent of old incense, where a revered scrolled in a silk-wrapped cylinder. Gently, reverently, she unrolled it and showed Aiko a hand-drawn map, not a geographic one, but a spiritual rendering. In the center was a mountain. Around it, rivers of fire, blood, and ink flowed, and beneath it, clearly inscribed, were the kanji for S. Kokoro, mind or spirit. He is not buried merely in the ground. Michiko said, her voice soft but resonant. He is buried in the memory of this land. He is in the stones, the roots, the stories. His spirit is entwined with the very foundation of the Kanto plain of Edo, of Tokyo. But how do I help him rest? Aiko asked, desperate for a solution. You don't, Michiko replied, her eyes piercing. He does not seek rest, not in the way you understand it. He seeks a voice, a vessel, someone to finally tell his true story, to redress the injustice that trapped him. Aiko looked up, a cold dread mixing with a strange sense of inevitability. You mean me? Michiko simply held her gaze. Someone must carry the truth. Or the truth, left unacknowledged, will continue to consume this city. Sith the rift. A vow and a response, I approx. 2 minutes that night, Aiko stood at the entrance to the underground chamber again. Alone. The air was heavy, charged with an unseen energy. She whispered into the hollow. Not a chant or an appeal, but a solemn promise born of Michiko's words and Masakado's insistent presence within her. I will tell your story. Not the one the Imperial Court wrote. Not the one of the demon or the curse. The one you lived, the truth of your intentions. A cold wind rose from the depths of the tunnel, swirling around her. The wall of ancient characters shimmered, as if imbued with a sudden, fleeting light. For a moment, she saw not just words, but faces, spectral shimmering images of soldiers, wary farmers, distraught mothers, diligent scribes, all those who had remembered him, even in secret, passing down his unofficial history. Their memories, their prayers, their fears, seemed to burn, etched into the very stone itself. And then the earth shook. She stumbled back, losing her footing. Sirens wailed in the distant city, growing louder, closer. A minor earth closer. The news would later say. A tremor barely registering on the Richter scale, no injuries, minimal damage. But Aiko knew. It was not a random seismic event. It was an answer. A response from the deep. Too fun fear warning from within. The price of truth approx. 3 minutes. The next day Hiroki confronted her, his face etched with worry, his voice strained. He had seen the news reports, felt the tremor. He knew. He's using you, Aiko, he said, his voice low and firm. Don't you see? You're not just studying him anymore. You're becoming his mouthpiece, his instrument. I'm telling his truth. Iko retorted, a flicker of Masakado's defiance in her own eyes. The one they buried. And what if that truth destroys everything else? Hiroki pressed, his voice rising. What if it costs people their lives? What if it costs your life? Aya looked at her with undisguised fear in her eyes. Aiko, you're starting to sound like him. Like the stories. Riku said nothing, his face grim. But later that night, he sent Aiko a photo he'd taken from the shrine, during the aftershocks of the tremor. A photo of her standing near the hollow. She wasn't alone in the picture. Behind her, faint and transparent, stood a man in ancient armor. His eyes, clear and ancient, were open, watching Wick. The vision was undeniable. 5 the breaking point approx. 2 minutes. By the 3rd week after the shrine cracked open, Tokyo began to change in ways that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Power outages blanketed districts in strange, rolling waves, targeting specific areas with unsettling precision. Crows gathered on rooftops in unnatural, silent numbers, their obsidian eyes seeing to watch the city. Small unsettling tremors struck daily, a constant, low rumble beneath the urban hum. People whispered of shadows moving independently of light, of fleeting, distorted reflections. At the center of it, Aiko no longer felt entirely herself. The line between her own consciousness and the ancient warrior's blurred, thinned, threatened to disappear. She dreamed of battles she never fought, woke with aching muscles, her palms clenched as if still gripping a phantom sword. Phrases in Old Japanese, not from her research, would occasionally surface in her thoughts. Her friends, once united in their quest, pulled away, afraid not just for her, but increasingly of her. Even she began to fear what she was becoming, the slow, insidious merging of two souls separated by a millennium. She returned to the underground chamber alone one final time. Not to ask questions, not to seek more answers, but to give something back, to make a desperate plea. I am not your weapon, she said into the hollow, her voice echoing in the oppressive silence. I am not your priestess. If you want your truth spoken, then show me. Not through dreams, not through whispers. Through your eyes, let me see it all without consuming me. The stones pulsed, a deep resonant throb. The temperature in the confined space dropped sharply, so cold a breath plumed in the air. And then everything went dark, a profound, absolute darkness that swallowed all light, all sound, the possession that wasn't, the chronicles approx. 3 minutes. When she awoke, it was dawn. She was lying amidst the rubble of the shrine above, the cold, damp earth beneath her. But her mind was not simply her own. She saw differently. The world was imbued with layers of ancient sight, fragments of long-lost understanding. It was not a possession. It was something far more profound. Masakado didn't take her over. He didn't consume her will or spirit. Instead, he reached out across 1,000 years and let her remember him from within. His thoughts, his deepest motives, his profound heartbreak at the betrayal, the brutal realities of his wars, not as ghostly visions, not as fleeting impressions, but with full, unvarnished clarity, as if Aiko had become his final, living chronicler, his last chance for historical redress. This was the pact, not vengeance but as understanding, and she would tell it. To the curse of the chronicle a new history approx. 2 minutes, Aiko emerged from her ordeal with one undeniable truth. Taira no Masakado had never truly wanted to be emperor in the conventional sense. He had wanted a different Japan, a more just society where power was earned through protection and genuine leadership, not simply inherited by name or enforced by distant, corrupt decrees. His crime, in the eyes of Kyoto, was challenging the very structure of their authority, not simply spilling blood for personal gain. He became a curse, not out of inherent evil, but because the land itself, and the collective memory of its people, could not contain a spirit so profoundly betrayed and so tragically unfinished. His story, buried and distorted by the victors, had created a profound imbalance. And now, the land called out for balance. Through Aiko's book, written in a furious, almost channeled burst of energy in the months that followed, Masakado's story was finally told in fulls. Not the villain, not merely the terrifying ghost, but the man, the protector, the rebel who yearned for peace and justice, even if he had to fight for it. It was a narrative that resonated with the forgotten whispers of the past, the truth behind the legends. And as the final page was written, as the last words were set down, Tokyo's tremors subtly, mysteriously stopped. The shrine's cracked stones, which had defied earlier repair efforts, seemed to knit themselves back together, as if the very earth had sighed in relief. Tufan fi epilogue. The stone watches still approx. 1 minute years later, Aiko stood once more before the Masakado Zuka. The city still hummed around it, but the awe of oppressive dread had lifted. She no longer dreamed of war, no longer felt the constant, chilling presence of an ancient soul. She had done what she vowed. But sometimes, when the wind turned just right through the narrow alley, she would hear, faint and distant, the sound of hooves. The thrum of an ancient warrior, forever etched into the landscape of the city he had fought for and against. And once, just once, a child passing by the monument, dragging a stick along the fence, paused and asked her, "Is the samurai under there really dead?" Iiko smiled, bending down to lay a fresh white flower on the stone. "Not dead," she said, her voice soft, carrying a truth now understood. "Just remembered."